I've been drinking Kool-Aid cameras like I did when I was 9, 'cause I like to pretend that I haven't lost the time. In the end, the nostalgia, though it tastes fine, I can only drink a couple 'cause it feels like a lie. We'd play Halo and we'd lay low in our basement until the sun began to rise. We would go to school but not learn too much, 'cause it's hard to read when you've got tired eyes. Months go by, the time it flies, past the days that we drink Kool-Aid in the summertime. Years go by, the time it flies, past the days that we drink Kool-Aid in the summertime. They've been with me for some time, and it's nice to know that they still by my side. Friends are like stars, 'cause no matter how far, when it's dark outside, they will be your light. We'd play Halo and we'd lay low in our basement until the sun began to rise. We would go to school but not learn too much, 'cause it's hard to read when you've got tired eyes. Months go by, the time it flies, past the days that we drink Kool-Aid in the summertime. Years go by, the time it flies, past the days that we drink Kool-Aid in the summertime.
Check, 1 2 1 2. There we go, and we're live. Welcome everyone who is currently in chat. Don't have a list at the moment, but welcome to the first online delivery of this Story 1 and 2 storytelling class. Thank you to everyone who's tuned in, and I'm hoping we'll have more people tune in the coming minutes. And so I'm going to get things started off by asking those who are here, how are you? How is everything? We've been going through a lot this last month or two. How are you holding up? How are you keeping busy? I know I'm keeping busy with this stream, this work. What about you guys? So feel free to shout out in chat. Whoever does happen to be here, hopefully we'll get some more momentarily. There we go. Just fixing up a setting or two. So, well, to answer my own question, as far as I go, I've been trying to get rid of my cabin fever. I step out for walks, wander around my neighborhood a bit. I've been doing a puzzle with my family. 9,000 pieces. Aside from that, I've been cooking a lot. I've been trying out new recipes, taking really nice photos of the food. Anything to keep me going. Because that's kind of the toughest part, is when you just have a bit too long to just sit and chill with nothing to do. You get antsy. Chat's still kind of small, at least on my, at least from what I see here. But again, if you're in chat, feel free to shout out. This isn't your traditional classroom where you have to wait and raise your hand. You can just talk. I'll eventually get around to your question, and I'll get around to your comment. There's no harm in just shouting out in chat. Also, please let me know if the music is too loud or way too quiet. It's hard to get a sense for it because I have two sets of headphones on. We're up to 3 viewers. Hopefully everyone got the memo. If not, the class has to go on anyways. It's just easier when we have a bit of a group for it. So I'm going to give us another, well, I've been live for 12 minutes. I'm going to give us another 2 or 3 minutes to let people come in. In the meantime, I guess I'm vamping. So for those who are tuning in for the first time, this is my essentially open classroom. I'm teaching a couple of different classes here on Twitch, and I upload everything to YouTube. In the case of this class, I'm teaching storytelling, or story 1 and 2. Today's class is about interviewing and why it's important, as well as a few interviewing tips and techniques. And we'll be getting to that momentarily. There are a few things I need to go over first for my students. There we go. We got a few people in chat again. So I'm going to drop the question one more time for those who just arrived. How have you been biding your time this last month? What have you been up to? How are you keeping from going stir crazy? Cabin fever? I said earlier I've been cooking, I've been walking just around my neighborhood, and I've been doing puzzles of all things. My great-grandmother would be proud. What about you guys? Come on, shout out in chat. You don't have to hide in the background. If you comment, I'm going to read it at some point. Stay hydrated. Especially when you're talking into a mic for a few hours. There we go. Watching a lot of TV shows. What have you been watching? I've been in video games. I've been I've been rewatching, of all things, Star Wars: The Clone Wars. Not the movie, but the animated TV show. Don't know how I came across it, just surfing Disney Plus at one point. Really good show. And then as far as video games, all I've been playing is Animal Crossing at this point. It has become my life outside of work. But really, what else am I doing? Same on the Animal Crossing. It's a solid game. I remember playing the original on GameCube. Animal Crossing is very good. Narcos and Clone Wars. Dope. That I did not expect to hear anyone else was rewatching that, of all things, but that's awesome. Let's see, what time are we at? 12:06. We'll give it one more minute. We got a few people in. Let's see if we can't get some more. But yeah, I've been taking a lot of walks in my neighborhood as well. Nothing crazy, just around the block. You know, staying distant from people, of course. It's definitely an interesting time we're dealing with right now. And so at some point I do have a kind of wind down period at the end of this, and if any of y'all want to talk about that, no problem there either. We're all going through this together, so why not discuss it together? But as far as today goes, again, I will reiterate, we are learning about, first of all, Canvas, which is the online delivery system for your guys' content, for this class's content, assignments, lecture files, any extra resources I want to give you will all wind up on there. So I'm going to show you how to get on there. At this point, y'all should have received your login info and passwords. If not, feel free to send me an email or reach out to Miss about it. But yeah, beyond that, we're going from learning about Canvas into learning about interviewing and why interviews, especially right now, are a pretty important way to put out media. And so let's jump right into that. Yes. So I'm going to switch over to my display. Canvas is pretty straightforward, but I'm going to give you kind of the quick tour. First of all, the way to get on Canvas is to go to mohawkcollege.ca. Plain and simple. Any Mohawk College page will give you access. Once you're on the page, you're going to go to Login, up top here. You're going to click on that, and you'll get a drop down. You want MyCanvas. So again, that's mohawkcollege.ca. Click on the Login button, and click on MyCanvas. You'll be brought to this page, a quick login page. This is where you'll put in your Mohawk ID. It's a 9-digit number, or 9-digit ID that you've been given. So you'll put that in there. Might be 10. I'm not the best at counting. Then your password is pretty straightforward. Mine I've already changed. It's all set in stone. Your password's either going to be the last 6 digits of your code, that being all the numbers that probably aren't 0, or it'll be your birth date. I believe in month, day, then year. I'll confirm that in a moment. In my case, I have a different password. Once you've logged in, you'll be greeted with, honestly, I'm not sure what you'll be greeted with, but what you'll want to do is wind up on your dashboard and click on our class. Our class in this case is Story 1 and 2. Then I'm going to switch to Student View so we see things like you will. You have a couple of tabs to work with. You have Home, Grades, and Modules. The big important tab is Home. It has everything that you need to navigate this class. So up top, I've put some key information. This is a quick guide to everything we'll be doing from now until the end of semester, roughly speaking. I have a little discussion board for if you're having troubles. You can jump in there and drop a question. I'll get back to you, or someone else can get back to you if they might know the answer. Then we have a few other tabs. The first thing I'm going to navigate to, I'm going to ignore assignments and tests for this moment. I'm going to navigate to the bottom. At the bottom of the page will be this week's content. It will always be this week's content. Next week I'm going to have the next file folder right below this week's. So you know that as long as you're scrolling to the bottom, you're on the most relevant, newest content. In this for you today, different things will be in there on different days depending on what we're learning. Today I have our PowerPoint that we'll be going over, as well as resources. Just a few external resources for extra learning if you want. It's not mandatory. In this case, it's Barbara Walters talking about how she conducts interviews. We have David Letterman interviewing Joaquin Phoenix, probably one of his most difficult interviews ever. And then we have a little primer on Q, which is a Canadian broadcast interview show on CBC Radio. Particularly good example of how to conduct interviews. Tom Power on there is a very, very good interviewer. Also a really cool dude. I met him once when I was interning at CBC. So scrolling back up to the top, again, we're on the home tab. We have assignments and tests. This is where you're going to get all the information you need for the assignments I give you. In the case of the story pitch and script writing assignments that I've already handed out, all the information's already there. I know a few people have already handed in their script writing assignments, which is awesome. Please continue to work on those as you have time. What's awesome about this is that when we click on one of these, let's take script writing for an example. If I click on that, I am brought to another page that has all the information, all the extra materials that you need, these red links. So an example, the worksheets you might need, any of that. And then right below is the rubric, what you're being marked on. So script formatting, full marks, part marks, no marks, a quick criteria of what you're being marked on. And once you've gone through all of this, you've made your assignment, you've written it up, all of that, you can just click submit assignment up top and hand in the files that you wrote. It's all on one easy page. So I'm going to go back up top and click on home to bring us back. And as I release more assignments, there are different days that I'm releasing the upcoming assignments. As I release more, they'll show up in this assignments tab. Same exact thing, you'll click on their name and you'll get all the information, but also have a page where you can submit the assignment. So you don't have to remember my email and email it to me. That said, if you have, don't worry about it. I'm not going to dock you marks or anything. Like, if you've emailed me your assignment, I'll just move it over into Canvas and mark it on there for you. Beyond that, I do have a resource tab, previous lessons. I'm probably going to put up some playlists of videos, music that tend to inspire me as far as audio video goes. I'll have probably another playlist. I tend to give one to every class of just chill music to edit and do schoolwork to. I really like to share media. I find it connects people, right? So that will also be on here somewhere. Everything's in the home tab. Before I move on, just shouting out into chat, does anyone need me to go over anything again with Canvas? I will happily do so again at the end, but while we're here, I might as well see if anyone is having problems right now. I'll wait for the delay in chat to catch up. In the meantime, I am going to click on the grades tab, just to let you know that this is where you would check your marks. You'll get the assignment grades specifically, and then you'll get the grades for the assignment categories, which is to say the weighted grades. You can also see that our upcoming assignments are one on quote-unquote public relations, an assignment on character creation that I'm hoping to draw some inspiration from D&D on, and our final assignment on storyboarding. The password order, I assume you mean if it's your birthday, let me double check that. Give me one quick second, just finding the information. Your password will be the last 6 digits of your Mohawk ID number, that 9-digit number, or your date of birth, month, day, year. So either way, it's 6 digits. Either it's month, day, year of your birth date, or it's your Mohawk ID. So hopefully that answers your question. If anyone has any other questions that come up, feel free to ask them as they come up. You can @ me in chat with @ChrisArndtInstructor. If you have something pressing, it'll highlight so I'll notice it quicker. Or feel free to save them to the end. During our wind down, it'll basically be a question and answer period. So no worries there. So that's Canvas in a nutshell. I'm going to be making a little tutorial video on this as well that I'll be giving to you guys. Just so that you can get all these answers right away. And I'll make sure it's delivered to you in a way that isn't just Canvas. Otherwise it might not serve a purpose at all. So I'm going to minimize this. And let's talk about interviewing. Pardon me. 2 other little bits of housekeeping. The first is that outside of this stream and outside of Canvas, where you can access all the class resources, I also upload all my streams to my YouTube channel, which if you are on Twitch currently, you can scroll down and see that there's a little link below in my stream description. That link, all your classes will be uploaded every Friday after I stream the class. So that if you couldn't make it, if you had to tune out partway through, no harm, you can catch it there. Or let's say your internet gives out halfway through a stream. Again, no issue, you can watch it on YouTube. It'll also be on Canvas too. Finally, one thing to keep in mind for the end of stream, assuming you're sticking all the way through, is that I'm currently collecting a list of things you guys want to learn about. This doesn't have to be dry stuff like interviews and PR and all this stuff. It can be tech stuff. It can be stuff for Adobe Premiere. It can be how to shoot a video. I'm very lucky that I have a very flexible workflow here. I can change things around. I'm shooting on my Sony camera, so I can turn it around and do a standing in front of you lecture. So if you want to learn about something, please let me know, because I'll either incorporate it into one of these classes or incorporate it into one of my extra live streams that you can tune into on your own time. So if you have ideas, save them, shout them out at the end of stream. In the meantime, let's actually start talking about interviews, because we do need to get through this. Let's go to slideshow mode. So, lots happened since our last class. Last thing we were talking about was script writing, Dan Harmon's story circle and all of that. Again, I've received a couple of submissions for those assignments, and that's awesome. If you haven't started working on that, I do recommend you try to keep up as best you can with everything that's going on. Today, though, we're going to talk about interviews and why interviews are important, especially nowadays. So, we'll talk about interviews. We'll have a little activity. It'll take 5 minutes. We'll have another little 5-minute break to get some more water or to go to the bathroom or whatever. And then we'll finish up with a little bit more info and a quick wind down. So, my question for you guys right now is, what purpose do interviews serve? Feel free to shout out an answer. We're going to be getting right into it pretty quickly. But think about why we hold interviews. What the point is of us just talking to someone and asking them questions. Ultimately, we can write a million different stories, but at the end of the day, most of these stories boil down to our characters and their development, a lot more than they have to do with us, the writer. In the case of true stories, whether written or video like a documentary, more often than not, our subjects are the ones our audience wants to hear about, our audience wants to know about. Outside of the rare exception where we're writing an autobiography, if I'm writing about, if I'm writing about people who help endangered animals in Africa, people don't care what I say on camera. People care about the audience cares about the people who are actually saving these animals, who actually have a stake in our story. Interviews allow us to indulge that fact that people want to hear from someone other than us. Simply put, an interview is asking someone about what they know, ideally on camera or on the radio. It's recorded in some way, ideally, but sometimes not even. Sometimes we interview just to get information for the background of a story. Why are we learning about interviews today? Bear with me. I changed some of the headers on this last minute. Ultimately, we are learning about interviews right now because of COVID-19, because of the pandemic going on, because of the fact that this is the only way I can meet with you guys to teach you. And very often when on TV shows we have to conduct interviews or over the radio, we can't necessarily have someone sit in studio. We can't necessarily have a big production crew to go to their house. And so the remote interview of a webcam in a computer, or in my case, my better camera, is the only way we can do this. The pandemic's forced us to look at how we communicate with each other, especially in media. A couple examples I pulled are The Daily Show with Trevor Noah, The Late Show with Stephen Colbert, Saturday Night Live have all tried to come up with a way to deliver their craft, deliver their comedy, deliver their medium in a way that's non-traditional. Stephen Colbert had an entire episode of The Late Show recorded without an audience. He was just telling his jokes as a monologue to nobody. I think he was telling it to the camera crew. It was rough. I'll spoil that one for you. It was very rough. But that said, whether we're in the same room or over a long-distance connection, interviews don't really change. The fundamentals, the basics behind them don't really change. Before we talk about that, I wanted to give you an example of how we're reaching out in this remote way. So bear with me for 1 second while I get these things popped up. And let me get rid of my music for a moment. There we go. So again, I mentioned that Saturday Night Live tried to do this, tried to give us their show in a way that worked with social distancing. And this is a quick overview of what they did. I'm not going to play it all. I'll leave a link. Well, there's a link in the PowerPoint that you guys have access to on Canvas. So let's get back to our PowerPoint and let's throw that music back on because I miss it. There we go. So there we go. Ultimately, the biggest thing we need to keep in mind with a interview is preparation. I threw some Boy Scouts in there. Always be prepared, because you need to have a plan when you go into an interview. Except the rare exception where an interview is entirely scripted and fake in the first place, you need to know what you're asking about. You need to look like you understand the situation. You need to have researched the topic you're talking about. Good interviewers don't just wing it. Even though it feels like that, it feels very natural. It feels like they just know everything about this person without having done any work. They have most of their questions planned out in advance. They have all this research done, and this benefits them in a lot of ways. Because they're so organized, Tom Power, for example, the guy who works with Q in CBC, he'll be doing an interview and he has his prepared questions. But because he's so prepared, he is able to take the time to listen to all the questions or all the answers and spot new questions that he's going to ask that he may not have considered before. This is what makes an interview really good, and this is what really pulls information out. In some cases, our interviews are going to be entire interviews where we're getting all the information we can and posting all the information we can. Other times when we're interviewing, we're looking for that one gem, that one quote from them that's worth putting in our video, worth putting in our radio piece. And by being able to have a plan, by researching, by not just winging things, we set ourselves up better for getting that one gem, that one diamond of a quote. So you have to ask yourself, even before you're interviewing, why am I doing it? Why am I talking to this person? What information do I need for my story, for my video? What do I want to kind of direct them toward as far as the question I'm going to ask? How much information can they give me? How much information do I need for my video? Do I need 5 minutes of interview? Do I need 6 seconds? What expertise does this person have? Ultimately, this all depends incredibly on the variability of all these different videos you might do. But ultimately, the foundations are all the same. No matter whether you're interviewing someone on a local charity, you're interviewing someone on them having been to jail once, or you're interviewing someone on their trip to Africa, the questions are going to be different, but the preparation is the same. There's, again, different kinds of interviews. In essence, there are 3 different kinds that you guys will likely deal with, not counting job interviews. And assuming we don't count scripted interviews that are fake in the first place. We have the television interview, which is pre-recorded. There's a lot of safety in this. If we get something wrong, if someone stutters, if someone gives out incorrect information, or God forbid you, the interviewer, have your information wrong, this doesn't necessarily wind up on TV. We cut that bit out. Same with radio. We can pre-record an interview. And most of these interviews that are pre-recorded, we also have what's called a green, which is a pre-interview. So someone else has already talked to this person and said, hey, we want to ask you about this, this, and this. What do you know? Then they've come back to you and said, yeah, your interview candidates or your interviewee is awesome. Ask them about this because they have a really good answer. Don't ask them about this because they get upset by it. When you're working with a team, you have the luxury of being able to do a green or a pre-interview. When you're working on your own, maybe not. Finally, we have the live interview, which is the scariest and most dangerous of all interviews because anything can happen. There have been interviews on different radio stations where someone will go on with, I'm talking about this thing you're interviewing me about. And then suddenly it's like, but I want to talk about this thing of my own interests, or this political thing that I believe in that has nothing to do with what we're talking about. They kind of pull a bait and switch. Live interviews can be really scary, and only the best interviewers really get the chance to conduct interviews like this, because you need to know what to do when something goes wrong. Before I get into research, speaking of something going wrong, one of the examples I have for you on Canvas that I haven't included in this PowerPoint is the second one. That's David Letterman interviewing Joaquin Phoenix, the man who played Joker very recently. And everything went wrong with that interview. Joaquin was the worst interview subject David Letterman ever dealt with because of this one interview. Ultimately, it was for a reason. If you do more research, you'll find that out. But I recommend watching the interview because Letterman handles it to the best of his ability. And he's a pro. So, your research. What kind of research are you doing? Each type of interview requires a fair amount of research, but different types of research. Sometimes we need to know about the subject matter that an expert is talking about. Other times we're interviewing, let's say, a doctor. There's lots of doctor interviews going on right now. We don't need to know everything there is to know about COVID that we're interviewing the doctor about. We just need to know the right questions. We need to know what our audience wants to know. If you don't do any research, though, you won't even know what questions to ask. Imagine going in and interviewing a doctor about COVID and not even knowing what COVID is, like what coronavirus and what the illness is. You wouldn't know what questions to ask, or you wouldn't recognize a good answer. You wouldn't see that answer that leads into a better question that you didn't think about. Don't waste the time of the interviewees. Always make sure to do some basic factual research beforehand. You don't want to interview a scientist about the moons of Jupiter and not know how many moons of Jupiter there are. You don't want them to give you that quote because anyone could look that up. You want them to give you the interesting stuff. And so you knowing that already goes a long way. Also, don't ask me how many moons of Jupiter there are. I do not know. There's quite a few. I know Io is a moon of Jupiter. So, why research pays off? It saves time. You can focus on the new information. It allows you to ask more interesting questions because you know a little bit about the subject. You'll know background facts. You won't appear ignorant to your interviewee because at the end of the day, it's all about establishing a relationship with them. It's all about building trust. And if they know you don't understand a thing, they're not going to trust you to interview well. You'll know what you need your subject to say too, because again, if we're looking for that one diamond of a quote, we typically have an idea of what we want to hear, and we are able to direct them toward that answer. And ultimately, again, subjects open up to well-informed questions. The guy who's always asked about his art and what inspired him is really annoyed by the question, what inspired you to make this art? The guy who's asked, well, your art reminds me of these 3 different styles. Do you take from any of these styles in your own work? Suddenly is way more interested. I speak from my limited expertise interviewing artists. Preparing questions is always a time-consuming but important step in interviewing. A lot of people will go in, even with research done, but thinking, yeah, I'll get their name, I'll ask them this question, and then we'll see where things go. No, don't do that. At the end of the day, I've done interviews like that. In all my confidence, I was like, yeah, I know about this. I don't need questions. And those interviews go one of 2 ways. Either they barely work out, you kind of stumble along, and it's not all that great. Or you ask the first question, they end the question, you don't know where to go from there, and you just kind of botch it. You kind of end up re-asking the question, they look at you weird, it's a whole situation. At the end of the day, having good questions already prepared and written out allow you to understand the focus of a story even before you do the interview. It allows you to see the direction you want to go with your questions. I'm going to ask this, which will lead into this, which will lead into this. Having that, even for your own peace of mind, really helps your confidence. I've gone into interviews with a list of questions and then wound up just asking one question and going off of that, and it worked. But I knew the entire time I was doing that if this suddenly stops, if this hits a brick wall, I have my questions all ready, all written out. Planning questions in advance is important. Following your question line, or your cue line as I have it here, don't follow it to the dot. If they go off on a tangent, if they wind up leading into a subject that has to do with your last question, bring up your last question. Don't let them get all excited telling you something and then interrupt them with a question that has nothing to do with what they're talking about. Work with them. It's like a dance. Or again, a conversation. And again, listen, think of new questions. Some of my best questions have been ones that I came up with because I heard something that they answered. Who here understands what an open-ended question is. I'd love someone to shout out in chat what an open-ended question is. So while I wait on that lag, ultimately our best questions that we will ask are going to be short, open-ended questions, and very often they're questions that begin with what, how, and why. Because instead of our interviewee responding with a specific factual answer, what, how, and why elicit opinions, elicit feelings. They elicit broader ideas. Because if I ask a question that's going to come to an abrupt halt, I'm very quickly ruining that pace of the dance that I was just talking about. It's all about coming up with a question that feeds into more of their opinion, more of their feeling, more of their perspective. Because it's not about me, it's about them. That's why a short question is good. That said, some interviewers, myself included, will often allude to my own perspective. I feel this way. I'm curious what your take is. In my experience, I've run across this. How do you feel about it? I haven't got any answers in chat, so I'm not sure if it's a lag or just people are too shy to shout out. But ultimately, an open-ended question is a question that can't be answered with yes, no, ideally one that isn't answered with a single word. If I'm asking, do you feel good? That's the question. Like, do you feel good? Yes. There we go. That's one question on my list done. Not a useful quote whatsoever. Imagine me just putting in a clip of someone saying yes to the camera. Not useful, right? So if I ask, how do you feel today? I might get them saying, I feel good. And that may be useful, that may not be. I might also get them talking about, I feel pretty good. Today I woke up on the right side of the bed for sure. I went downstairs and had a really nice breakfast. That might be usable. Again, depending on the purpose of our video, of course. So, this is the activity I wanted to give you guys. Yeah, we still got a little group in chat. I want you to come up with a question for me. If you were interviewing me. If you were interviewing me about what I've been up to during the lockdown while working from home, all of that, what kind of question you would ask. I'm not marking you on this. This is no biggie. Because honestly, while I get you guys to think of these questions, while I get you guys to hopefully write out these questions in chat, please, I'm also going to open things up for a quick 5 to 10 minute break, somewhere in there, probably closer to 5 minutes. Just in case you need to run to the washroom, need to grab some water, need to do whatever. I could definitely do with grabbing some water, so I will be back in a few moments. In the meantime, try to come up with a question for me. we go. I'm back. Grab some water. Still no, oh, there we go. Got a question. I'm very curious the delay. Normally it's not too bad, but it seems a bit long. What's your favorite thing that you've cooked during the quarantine, the lockdown? I still don't know a good word to describe the situation we're living in right now. Favorite thing I've cooked? Well, just the other day I used the smoker out in the backyard with my stepfather. We actually smoked up some chicken legs and sausage, and for Easter I did a glazed ham as well. That was really, really good. What about y'all? Any of you cooking? Any of you maybe doing art? I've had a few students say that they've taken to painting, or they've taken to knitting. They've taken to different crafts. Oh, look at this delay. Yeah, I barely have a delay here, so y'all are just hiding in chat. Which, fair enough. I can't force you to ask questions. I am hoping that over the next few classes, over the next weeks, you guys get a bit more comfortable with this. Because remember, at the end of the day, you can keep chat going. I'll eventually catch up to what you're saying. So if you have questions, if you just want to talk with each other, Lord knows, I would hope at least some of you are friends and want to chat. Feel free to. It's not a situation where you have to raise your hand, which is kind of one of the awesome things about this open classroom. I'm going to move on. Let's talk about clarification. One of the hardest things to do during an interview, when talking to someone, is admit that you don't understand. My advice to you, if you're in that situation where you're having a hard time admitting you don't understand, admitting you didn't understand a word, get over it. One of the big things about journalism is you have to, especially journalism, but even generally in media, you have to be able to deal with these things when they come up. It's the same with if I'm filming and someone steps off their mark, if they step out of focus, if they step into a shadow. I have to say, no, I need you to move back. Same idea. If someone's giving an answer and I don't understand, no, I need you to go back on that. I need you to explain what you just said. Because if I don't understand, my audience might not understand. It's the same with if someone's giving an amazing quote about like that diamond quote you want, and then they stumble a word, just make them repeat it. It will save you so much trouble in post editing if your interviewee says a full clean sentence. Don't be afraid to ask a question that seems naive or silly. Don't be afraid to look like the bad guy in those moments, because it's better you look that way than your audience, the people who read your article, the people who watch your video, be confused. At the end of the day, you can embarrass yourself by not having fixed an issue like this. So organizing the cue line, the question line. This is something that every journalist, every interviewer does this differently. Rule of thumb, if you're doing a quick interview, if you have to be in and out real quick, get to the point quickly. I don't care about the first 3 questions you ask to make them comfortable. I want that one quote. Don't just jump right into it. Like, again, there's kind of like a give and take in a situation like this. My point is that in a future interview, something that's not live, something that's pre-recorded, you can chat. You can make them feel more comfortable. You can get to know them for this dance, for this conversation you're doing. In a news interview or a live interview, You still have to do all of that, but you have 1/8 of the time. Instead of having 20 minutes to get to know them, you have 1 minute to get to know them, and then you need that answer. That said, start with simple questions and end with anything controversial, difficult, anything that would upset them. Because at the end of the day, if someone gets angry at you during an interview, which it can happen. I've never had it happen to a point that was an issue. If something does go wrong, if they get angry, at least you've got all the simple questions answered. You got the easy stuff done. Sure, they didn't answer the one tough question, but you at least got everything else. So again, start simple, end controversial. Depending on the length of your interview, depends on the length of time you have to get used to each other. Ending an interview. This is probably the biggest tip I will ever give you for asking questions, for interviewing. Ask if they have anything to add. Is there anything else you'd like to say? Is there a question, or is there anything you expected me to ask, you wished I had asked, that I didn't? If so, let's talk about it now. Is there anything else you'd like to add are some of the best quotes I've ever gotten, whether for print interview or for video interview, because that's where people, for every other question, you have to put yourself in the mind of the interviewee, the person being asked. For every other question, the interviewee is sitting there like, okay, I need to answer this question right. I need to answer this question right. I need to think. I need to say everything perfectly. When you say, how do you feel about this? Is there anything else you want to talk about? Just let's chat. This is your podium to stand on and talk. Suddenly all that apprehension that they feel is let go. It's like, okay, I can just talk about anything. What else do I want to talk about? Oh, this thing that I really care about. I'm going to talk to you candidly. I'm going to explain it clearly. I just want people to know this. I just want people to feel this. Our charity is important because this is how I feel. I'm not worried about the questions being asked. I'm worried about how I feel as the interviewee. So that question is the best question you can ever ask. That said, you need to get there. You need to have a good interview to get there. It's also worthwhile asking if they know anyone else to interview. Like in art, this is a huge thing. I'll talk to an artist and it's like, do you know anyone else who'd want to talk about your piece? It's like, yeah, here's some of my friends. Here's another artist I know. Here's a critic who happens to be in the room, who I was talking to earlier. The best way to network with people, whether in media, whether in journalism, whether in anything, is talking to them. And with an interview, you have an excuse to talk to anyone. It's the best part about, for me, the best part about being a journalist is when I have that journalist hat on, am Mr. Confidence. I can talk to anyone about anything because that's my job. And the best way to network from there is taking those people you have to talk to and turning it into more people to talk to. It's good for a story. It's good to just make friends and meet people. It's a really good way to flesh out your story, to make it about more than just what you thought, to make it about what the community is, to make it about what the subject is as a whole. And always thank the interviewee for their time. Even if they're a jerk, even if things went poorly, you need to represent yourself well, because you're representing yourself, you're representing anyone else in the video, involved in the video you're making. You're representing, if you're doing news, the news organization that you work for. Like, imagine working for CBC, having a kind of terrible interview, and then just being a snarky jerk to them at the end of it. Not only will they see CBC as this terrible place full of jerk people, but anyone else they talk to will. It's a really good way to ruin your reputation. And so don't even worry about ruining your reputation. Just be polite, be kind, be clear. Thank them for their time. Thank them graciously for answering your questions. It's the least you can do, because they're helping you do your job, even if it was a bad interview. remote interviews. Remote interviews, they're more common, especially now than ever, but they become more common over time. Whether on television or a telephone or Skype, remote interviews save transportation time. It's easier to screen your sources because you can just quick chat with them. You can send an email to them, get to know them a little bit, and then throw on Skype. It gives you a bigger chance of technical issues. That's the biggest concern interviewing over Skype, interviewing over Zoom, or any of those other programs, is that if the person you're interviewing has a bad computer, a bad internet connection, a bad mic, a bad camera, things can look bad. And you never know what combination of those things they will or won't have. You never know what could happen. A power outage could kill my entire live stream right now. And I am helpless to control that. At least if I'm in the room with the person, I can quick whip out my phone and interview them this way. I can quick whip out my phone and just get an audio interview. I don't have that luxury at a distance like this. But it also means that the scientist I'm interviewing who's studying different flowers in the Amazon rainforest, if they can find even the slightest internet connection, there's a good chance I can do an interview with someone in the middle of Brazil. And that's amazing. That's something that not only does an audience enjoy that, but an audience very often will be quite forgiving of the low quality. Even on the news right now, you'll see people doing interviews from like the comfort of their own home. But in my house, my stepfather watches CNN, and Chris Cuomo is one of the anchors for CNN. He's been in quarantine. He had or has COVID-19, and so he started doing his show from his house. And the quality of his video is not necessarily the best. His audio cuts out every once in a while, but everything mostly works, and we acknowledge that he's in his own home. And so it's not going to be as good as the CNN studio. That's the cool thing about live. That's the cool thing about remote, is that people inherently understand that it's not going to be quite as good. That said, we try our best. Like, I have my expensive camera and my really good mic set up for this instead of my webcam and my headphone mic, because I want the quality to be the best it can. But don't be surprised if we run into technical issues. Always start your remote interviews. Make sure you're on the same page. Make sure they know what you're interviewing them about. Make sure that they know how long it's going to take, that you in fact have all the information correct, like their name, their job title, all of that, because you may not have the luxury of re-asking, or you may get partway into the interview and it's like, this isn't what I was going to talk to you about. And it's a terrible feeling when that happens, speaking from experience. Keep remote interviews brief and to the point. There's no sense wasting time, and again, rarely with a remote interview are you trying to fill 20 minutes of time. You're typically trying to get either the golden quotes, or you're trying to do a quick hit on like a news show. And so there's no sense in spending 30 minutes on there where any minute could be a glitch, when you only need to spend 5. And thus make the likelihood of a glitch much lower. Taking notes. Whenever I'm interviewing, whether on camera, whether with audio, I don't have any interview notes written in here, but I'm constantly taking notes. I have a big notebook for if I want them to see what notes I'm taking. I have a little handheld notebook for if I just want to take my own little notes. There have been times where I've doodled as well, because it's how it goes. Taking notes is one of the best tools not only an interviewer has, but if you're doing something like journalism or documentary, it can save you from a lot of trouble. Same with the recording, and we'll get to that. So, if you don't take detailed notes or record the conversation, you're not going to remember it. Because at the end of the day, the recording the conversation, writing it down, helps you process things. If all you do is record, you're able to focus on the answers, but you'll have to go back through the entire interview. That's happened to me a few times. I've done a 45-minute interview on rabies and coyotes that I've had to scrub through the entire thing to find the quotes I wanted because I didn't take the time to write, okay, she talked about this. This is a good quote. It's been 6 minutes of interview so far. Don't be me. Don't scrub through 45 minutes of coyote notes or a coyote interview. Just take notes. Your best option is to record, is to set up something that's pretty surefire, like recording on your phone. Then take notes on the side, because no one, to be honest, no one under like 40 knows how to take notes perfectly. Like take notes consistently and thorough and record everything that's said. That's not a skill that people really have anymore, myself included. That's why I record things. That's why I do media. But notes allow you to jot down questions. Notes allow you to say, this was a good quote. Here's the timestamp. It's a really, really valuable tool. The other thing to keep in mind before I get into this checklist is recording. Depending on what you're doing, you're going to get different recording qualities. If you're doing a TV interview or an interview for like a really high quality video, obviously you're going to spring for a good mic, a good camera, to make sure everything's clear. If you're just getting some audio for, let's say, a radio piece, or just a quick little video, you're going to throw some audio in the background. You won't have them on camera talking. Your phone is your best friend. Your phone most likely has an audio recording app. I know mine does. I think all iPhones do. Don't quote me on that. If it doesn't have one, you can easily download one. The thing to keep in mind with recording on a phone is this is bad quality. If I hold my phone this far from me, I'm going to start getting poorer quality audio. If I'm interviewing someone, assuming I can get away with this, use your phone like a microphone. Here, so just below someone's chin, is the best place to record good quality audio on your phone. Because at the end of the day, your phone has a really, really, really good audio card. Can record really high quality audio. But the microphone costs about 36 cents. It's a really, really, really cheap microphone. So you can't get away with staying 3 meters from your source. Although nowadays you would have to. If you have the luxury, use this thing like you would use a normal microphone, just a handheld dynamic mic. It will, again, it will give you really good quality audio, and that's worth noting. In the journalism program at Mohawk, not only are people being taught to use this for audio, people are being taught to use phones to shoot most of their videos. Not exclusively, but it's a valuable tool. Having something you can pull out of your pocket to record an interview, whether video or audio, is super, super valuable. So, getting back to the lecture, I just wanted to go on that tangent. I've gone on a couple at this point. You have to go through kind of a bit of a checklist when you're doing an interview. What type of story are you doing? What do you need to know for your story? What do you need to highlight for your story? What kind of quote are you looking for? Use an interview to get facts, details, timelines, things that you wouldn't be able to normally simply research. Use interviews as well to get opinions, because at the end of the day, at least in journalism, no one wants to know my opinion. I am not that important, but everyone wants to know my source's opinion. If I'm talking to Doug Ford about the Ontario government, yes, his opinion is important. I don't necessarily, politics aside, he's the premier, and so getting his opinions means something. myself, a random reporter from Hamilton, it means nothing. Or it means little. Find the best sources for your story you want to tell. If you're doing a story about politics, dig for some good political interviews. If you're doing a story about COVID-19, find a doctor, don't interview the guy on the street. If you do interview the guy on the street, make sure it's from a very safe distance. Keep in mind your timeline, the nature of your story, the expertise of your sources. How much time do you have to get your interview done? Does your story need these long interviews, or will a short one suffice? Does your source know enough to make it worth having a long interview? If they know everything there is to know about your subject, get all the quotes you can. But if they know one thing that you need to know, just stick with that. Beyond that, you need to do as much background research as you can before you set up the interview, for all the reasons I mentioned earlier. Choose questions that are relevant to your story. They'll give you what you need. Nothing worse than going back to the studio to edit your video and realizing that you didn't ask a question that you should have. Ask, again, open-ended, relevant questions that they can't just say yes or no to. Ask questions that really start to dig into the subject you're talking about. Stay neutral when asking tough questions. No one wants to feel attacked during an interview. Some interviews will automatically make people feel that way because you're interviewing them about something that's uncomfortable. Don't add to that. Whether you're doing this for a video, journalism aside, whether you're doing it for a video, whether you're doing it for radio, whether you're doing it for your own documentary, be like a journalist. Be neutral in this one case. Take notes, but make sure to record for backup. And if you're doing an interview, obviously for TV, for video, for radio, record it in general. That said, backup recordings are a good call too. Listen is one of the biggest tips. Not only for new questions, but to know when you have the answer you need. Looking back on my 45-minute Coyote interview, I probably could have left after 15. But I was being too nice, if I'm being honest. So that's it. If you have questions, my email, as per usual. You can also always shout out questions here in chat, like I said, at least while we're live, and I recommend doing so. But that's our lecture for today. There we go. So, getting back to my earlier mention of things to remember. Is there anything you guys are looking to learn that isn't on the class schedule? Whether audio, video, whether more of this storytelling, journalism, any of that. I'll give you a moment while I hydrate. I will say that I've been looking into doing more Photoshop and Premiere and After Effects tutorials on this channel in my 5 o'clock Wednesday slot. That class is finished. My actual audio video class with Mohawk is finished, and so now I'm just going to use it for spare tutorial space, spare learning space, a good place for me to just do some editing and chat with whoever might be in chat. So if you do ever want to tune into that time slot, feel free. It's not mandatory. It's not a class, not specific classroom at all. It's just a place to hopefully maybe learn something. So I'll get back to it. Anyone currently have any questions? Want to know anything? Is there anything you want to learn in future classes? I believe our next class is talking about, I keep calling it public relations, PR. It's not. It's more how we can take good stories that are going on right now, stories of people helping, stories of people caring, and turn those kinds of stories into something meaningful, something that people will see. That's actually pretty much the next assignment I'm going to be giving out is on that subject. But tomorrow we're going to be next week we're going to be learning about basically taking one little beautiful idea and turning it into something great. So that's next week. What else do you guys want to learn? There's plenty of empty slots that I can fill for classes. And if you can't think of anything right now, feel free to email me at my email. I believe all of you have it at this point. And for those of you who have not yet gotten on Canvas, I'm going to be creating a tutorial probably later today. It'll be out by Friday on just quickly how to get on and how to navigate Canvas. And I'll make sure Miss has that so that we can give it to you guys any way you need it. But I'm going to give things a couple more minutes to trickle in. Again, any questions you have, anything you want to learn, or just feel free to chat, because really I'm not doing much else after this outside of a bit of video editing. And I'm looking at about 10 names in chat, so y'all are here, even if you're not talking. Also, how do we feel about the choice of music? I was lucky enough to get a good license on this stuff, so... Would I do a project about what's going on? Do you mean... I'm hoping the delay is not too long. Do you mean, would I assign you guys a project about what's going on? Or do you mean me personally, would I do a video about what's going on? While I wait for that answer, I'll at least answer the second one. Currently, I'm not looking at doing anything personally. Video about what's going on, mostly because I'm already juggling all the work I have, and it's a lot of work to come up with an idea from scratch and get it off the ground and show it off. Never mind, it's a lot of work to set up a bunch of interviews. I'm not going to lie about that. The trick is figuring out a way to make it of value. Like, for example, I've considered doing some work for a couple of different companies in town, or offering some work to a couple of different companies in town about, like, doing a video basically saying we're still here, we're putting out we're still here, we're still doing delivery, don't forget about us. Like, doing some sort of promo like that is definitely worthwhile. Personally, I'm not much of a documentarian, at least at the moment. And so capturing kind of a snippet of what's happening in the world, not so much my jam. Not from scratch. I might talk to my one friend, Matthew, who is very much a documentarian. He likes writing those kinds of things. I'm more the cameraman and editor. I make it look good. I make it feel good. more than the writing side of things nowadays. That said, I can still do it. Yeah, something tells me the delay on some of your guys' end is a tad long. On my end, watching back, it's like half a second, but my computer is also the one that's streaming. I will say, in response to exactly what I was just talking about, there are also a lot of stories that are worth telling. It's a matter of figuring out ways to tell them. Like, there are people who are making masks and doing drop-offs for those. There are people who are doing all sorts of good things in the community. There's a group I follow on Facebook called Hamilton Caremongering, which is basically a group of people who have dedicated themselves to helping. If someone needs something picked up, people who happen to be out at the store mentioning, okay, yeah, this place has toilet paper, or this place has sanitizer on for cheap. There's all sorts of different creative outlets that people have been posting. For those who might be familiar, Mo Willems, he does a doodling at lunch hour for kids. There's all sorts of cool things going on that are worth highlighting. I just don't have the luxury of time right now to do it, more than anything. But with that, I am going to call it a class for today. Let you guys get back to everything else going on in your lives. Sounds like Animal Crossing for a couple of you guys, myself included. And I'm glad you all tuned in. I'm glad you all could join in and check out this class. And again, I'll be posting a video on demand version. I'll be posting this video on YouTube this Friday. And everything will be on Canvas as it comes out. I hope to see you again at the very least next Thursday at noon. Hopefully, maybe some of you will tune in at 5 on Wednesdays and check out that stream as well. So with that, you guys have a good one.